So, Geordie, as you and I are well aware, and many members of our audience are well aware, humanity is currently going through a massive period of change. I guess we're going through the fourth industrial revolution.
Yes, James, that's exactly right.
That's what people are calling it.
That's what people are calling it,
Yeah.
the use of AI and the digitised economy
Yeah.
that is going to grow over the next few decades.
Of course. And this is seen as kind of a huge shift in our kind of, I guess you could say, our economic mode of production.
Yeah,
If you
definitely.
want to give it a bit more of a Marxist lens. However, although we are being inundated with an abundance of kind of these new creative conveniences that are being gifted to us by our AI overlords, there are some far more kind of fundamental worrying underlying factors that underpin this entire revolution, are there not?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. What I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about data centers, actually. So I think previously we've talked a little bit about AI, artificial intelligence, the way it's beginning to permeate our lives more and more. I myself am using AI daily, using ChatGPT and other forms of AI. I think it's very useful. I think it's good. However, what I would like to talk about today is just the actual political economy of artificial intelligence and look a little bit at what data centers are going to mean for the Australian economy.
Of course, yeah.
So obviously a data center, first and foremost, is it's a heavily securitized premise containing racks of computer services, data storage drives, and other network hardwares. So these centers are a crucial piece of the infrastructure within inside the digital economy itself. So they provide services to individuals, people like you and I doing a podcast, to businesses and to governments, providing obviously the cloud servers themselves and the physical hardware for businesses to use. So as the digital economy expands and demand for artificial intelligence and cloud computing grows, data centers are going to be increasingly built.
Of course.
So Sydney and Melbourne are the home of Australia's $30 billion data center sector. So that makes up a combined 80% of total capacity.
In Australia, sorry?
Just in Australia, in Sydney, Melbourne. So New South Wales is leading this charge with 100 new centres approved and under assessment.
Wow.
So at the moment, Australia has about 250 data centres. And by 2030, I think this is going to increase by 50% at least.
Wow, yeah. So the data centres essentially are the physical hardware infrastructure that is required.
That's exactly right.
For this kind of AI-powered drive into the future.
Yeah, these are massive sheds that have the physical hardware to support the cloud infrastructure and cloud systems.
So just a big warehouse, essentially, full of computers.
Massive warehouses. Like, these are huge. This isn't a tiny little shed that has someone has in their backyard.
Some dude's crypto mining rig. No. Well, of course, you have to explain these things to me because I'm a technologically illiterate Luddite.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you've clarified that. That's good.
So just the other week, James, Scott Farquhar, who you may be familiar with.
I am.
He's one of Australia's leading billionaires. I think he's worth about $24 billion. He is the former CEO of Atlassian, one of Australia's software giants. So he appeared at the National Press Club in Canberra, selling his vision of Australia as a data centre hub for Southeast Asia.
Today, we are at another inflection point. We're entering a new energy revolution, but this time we're using energy to power knowledge work. Not physical work, using energy to power knowledge work. And just as we've gotten used to using energy to power physical work, we actually have to get used to and comfortable with using energy to power knowledge work. We in Australia have abundant advantages in this race. We have energy, we have vast land, a strong legal system, world-class engineers, and we have a strategic location in Southeast Asia. And just like Singapore, we can press those advantages. So ironically, Singapore has placed a moratorium on data centres because they were running out of power and land. Things that are fundamentally difficult for them to change. And that brings me to the first opportunity that I want to talk about today. Australia has an opportunity to host data centres for the entire Southeast Asian region and potentially beyond. Now, just like most people don't think on a daily basis about the source of their water or their power, most people don't think about how integral data centres are to everyday life. When an app on your phone reroutes you in traffic, maybe not so important in Canberra, but definitely where I come from in Sydney, that is an issue. When it routes you around traffic, getting you to work on time, it uses a little power in your phone. and it uses a lot more power in a data center somewhere. When my son learns math from an AI chatbot, it uses computing power hosted in a data center. When you watch Netflix, or as I do, replays of the Tour de France on SBS, it's only possible because of data centers. And it's easy to think of data centers as existing to help other people. These big international tech companies are building data centers, and who knows what happens within them. But the truth is that each of us uses a fraction of the computing power of a data center every single day. The buildings, the computers, the power, the water, all those are in service of making our lives either more productive or more enjoyable.
It was very interesting. His comparison, obviously, to instead of using power to undertake a physical task, like the energy kilojoules input, for example, as opposed to, moving something, driving a car, operating machinery, he is comparing that. And that was actually quite a helpful explanation from him to help me kind of conceptualize what he's talking about, as in the energy required to undertake these computing tasks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And he does paint a very rosy picture of kind of AI and data centers. Yeah. Being a tech billionaire, that should be to no surprise.
Yep.
He is right, though, in the sense that we are going to use these tools, these AI tools, more and more in our life. They're going to demand more and more energy, and more data centers are going to have to be built. However, what Mr. Farquhar paints as an attractive vision of Australia capitalising from data centers, he leaves out who actually owns these data centers.
Yes.
So while there's the obvious tech giants like Amazon, Google and the like, private equity firms such as Swiss private equity partner just acquired Green Square Data Centres, and another Australian data centre startup, AirTrunk, was just purchased by Blackstone for $24 billion.
Everyone's favourite investment firm, Blackstone.
Yeah. So these centres are not Australian-owned and are often owned by faceless corporate entities and private equity firms that suck up profits offshore. So just as you hear people being quite appalled about foreign companies, especially Chinese firms, buying up Australian assets, this is exactly what's going to happen to the data centres. Yeah. They're going to be controlled by offshore corporations.
Of course, and they will reap the profits whilst using our land and our energy and our resources.
Yeah, that's right. And what Scott Farquhar talks about is having the sovereign capacity for data centers. However, I would argue if Blackstone owns your data centers, you don't have any sovereign capacity.
No, of course. That negates your independence over the entire thing. I guess this is almost quite comparable to just, like you said, like foreign interests buying our mining, buying our mining companies, and obviously, monopolising our telecommunications, public transport, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera.
And they don't develop these industries, just like in the mining sector, for example. They'll extract the raw resources and simply export them overseas.
Yeah.
So in Australia, I mentioned previously, we've got over 250 data centres. That's going to increase by 50%. And just over the past 3 years in the US, the number of data centres has doubled from 2.6 thousand to 5.4 thousand.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's massive.
That's a lot.
And sorry, go on.
So do you know if we are actually at the stage where we are exporting our data capacity, shall I say, to other countries in Southeast Asia? Like you were saying, are we at that stage yet, or is that purely just for kind of domestic Australian?
It's for domestic Australian consumption, from my understanding. I know that the demand for data centres is increasing tenfold here in Australia as our economy digitises. That should not be.
Of course. Yeah. Further digitises.
Further digitises, that's right. No, that capacity is not for Southeast Asia yet.
Yeah.
He's saying that we should invest into that. That's what we should be doing.
Of course.
We should have that capacity to provide those services to Southeast Asia.
So just like we export gas, iron ore, coal, this we have to treat as another commodity in which we can export and make money off of, or the transnational corporations can profit off of.
That's exactly right. Just going back to the US, obviously because this has been happening for a few years now, their data center industry is quite developed. It's where we have a lot more information and a lot more pushback from the public.
I was about to say, I have seen there is quite a bit of backlash developing now in the United States.
Correct. So we'll go into the details as to why there is a lot of public concern for data centers, why there should be concern here in Australia. I'll just play this little excerpt from a clip.
The big problem is that we're all subsidizing the wealthiest corporations in the world in their pursuit of artificial intelligence.
Americans' utility bills are rising while big tech's profits are going through the roof.
We traveled into data center country and found a hidden wealth transfer. Everyday people covering the power costs of the data center build-out. Companies like Amazon and Meta striking secret deals with utilities.
It's all proprietary. It's all behind non-disclosure agreements and blacked out documents.
And lobbying for a system that leaves all of us footing their bill, unless we do something about it.
And if that's happened in America, the same thing's going to happen in Australia.
There's something just so terrifying and dystopian about kind of US extractive capitalism.
Yeah.
Because, for example, I can see, obviously, as he mentioned in that clip, they're addressing, the power bills are rising for the standard consumer, obviously. Yeah, at the same time, the AI and these data centers are what has the most power demand, essentially, in lots of these regions. So it's kind of painting for me a really bleak picture where, for example, your average person, there might not be investment in the future in public utilities because it's just not profitable investing in them, while you can have a data center that is profitable to invest in to provide the infrastructure to create those profits. I can see a weird twisted world where Americans in Mississippi have power for 3 hours a day, yet there's some gargantuan data center just over the hill just humming along the entire time, you know, chewing up fossil fuels, while the rest of the population are just kind of reduced to penury.
Also, these...
That's my dystopian kind of vision for the future. I'm sorry.
These massive tech companies also have the capability to pay for electricity. They have the capital to pay for it. Of
course.
This shouldn't really be surprising. Scott Farquhar, one of his visions is for the Australian government to come in and subsidise the construction of energy, communication, energy infrastructure to the data centres so that it's publicly subsidised.
The classic capitalist move. Subsidise my infrastructure, then I can privatise my profits.
The profits.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
A tale as old as time itself.
And he has said the same for the skilled work that's required for the data centres. He said that cost should not fall on the firms, the companies themselves, that the government should be training people to build the data centres.
Of course. Now, that's, of course, what Australia's richest man would say, isn't it? As someone on the other end of the spectrum, I do kind of believe that they should do the investing.
Yeah.
Not to say the Australian government obviously should regulate and play a part in that, but they should also be part of they should be extracting something out of it as well.
Yeah, but our tax money shouldn't be going towards transmission lines to power data centres.
No, exactly.
And then I'll be paying for that on my electricity bill.
Yeah.
Because that's what they showed in one of the documentaries I was watching, is that each customer is getting a $50 surcharge a month now to pay for the data centres to have electricity.
Insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Again, very dystopian.
Yeah, and also they have these massive corporations. They can employ lobbyists full-time to go to Washington or to Canberra to lobby for their interests. We can't, so...
Not yet.
Very powerful entities.
Not yet.
Look, one example I'd like to talk about is a data centre here in Australia. So it is the company is a $2 billion company called Next Next Data Center.
Cunning.
So the most recent centre they're building is being constructed in Melbourne on the site of the old printing complex, formerly Australia's largest newspaper press.
There you go.
So the fact that the data centre is now being built on the grave of an old printing press, I thought was quite ironic.
That's quite symbolic, isn't it?
It is very symbolic, actually. So the chief executive of Next DC, a man called Craig Scroggie, said that just as electricity powered the industrial age, sovereign AI infrastructure would power the next age. So as the digital economy grows and transforms our lives, it's worth analysing the political economy of this transformation. So just like the old textile mills and industrial factories of the 19th and 20th centuries, these data centres are forms of capital goods used in production. Unlike the old industrial factories, however, they're not labour intensive.
Of course.
They are resource and capital intensive.
Yep.
It's very important to actually point that out.
Make that distinction, yeah.
Yeah, so that is that they require huge amounts of investment to get them up and running and massive amounts of natural resources such as energy and water to sustain them. And the counter-argument to this is that obviously they'll become more efficient, they'll have closed-loop systems, they'll be able to recycle water, use renewable energies. That's a optimistic outlook, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure there is some truth to it. However, the demand for resources that these things take is just, it's astronomical.
It's phenomenal. Yeah.
It's
And
absolutely phenomenal.
all the more worrying being that, again, Australia is a very dry place, a very dry continent. We're already kind of stretched to the limits of our capacity in terms of water usage, I feel like.
And energy as well. Obviously, we export so much of our gas. We don't leave much here for domestic supply. And the coalition, for 10 years, shut down coal-fired power stations,
Yep.
invested no money in renewable technologies.
Yep.
So we're going through that massive transformation. As our economy continues to digitise and the demand for electricity increases, I think there's definitely going to be a gap there.
Of course, yeah. But again, to be optimistic, we do have the potential to have like enough renewable energy capacity
Yeah.
in Australia to power these data centres as well.
For sure. No, you're definitely right. Going back to how resource intensive these data centres are, Bloomberg modelling suggests that the data centres could account for more than 10% of Australia's electricity use by 2035, just in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And Sydney Water has predicted that they could consume a quarter of the city's water supply by 2035.
That is insane.
It's pretty insane.
Sydney's a big city.
Yeah.
It's a very big city.
And so documents lodged with the New South Wales planning authorities last week revealed a new data centre complex proposed in Western Sydney's Kemps Creek could use up to 1 gigawatt of power capacity and include 6 four-storey buildings, 936 cooling units, and 852 diesel backup generators.
Wow.
You just got to understand the scale of these things. They're massive.
That is huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
852 diesel backup generators.
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
Moreover, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have been paying for up to 50% more for industrial property inside Melbourne and New South Wales.
Wow.
So that is obviously just driving up the prices of
yeah.
land
Yeah.
and property. And what it's also doing is it's crowding out other firms that could use this land for more productive manufacturing.
Of course it
Instead,
is.
because
Yeah.
the footprint of these data centers is massive. And you think they're buying up this land, they're paying heaps more for it, they're driving up the prices, and that means less and less Australian firms that are actually productive
Yeah.
can't buy the land.
Of course, yeah. So if you wanted to set up a factory making bull bars or something like that,
Yeah.
you can't do it because the land, the price of the land is just too much.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, I'm not going to go into the AI bubble as well. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation about how profitable this massive investment into AI is going to be.
Yeah.
This is something we've spoken about previously.
Yep.
Obviously, there was the dot-com bubble, where a whole lot of investment went into the internet in the early 2000s, and that popped. And there is, if you just look up the AI bubble, there are articles from reputable news outlets speculating on what's going to happen to the AI bubble. These data centers require huge amounts of investment, and it hasn't been proven that they're actually going to be profitable into the future.
Of course. So I think we discussed this the last time we talked about AI, Geordie, is I think you said that whatever a large percentage of the United States GDP growth is just inflating the AI bubble.
Yeah, so I heard somewhere that I think the US economy grew by 1.6%.
Yep.
And someone speculated that there was about 0.4% of that
Yeah.
is just in AI.
Of course, like a good quarter of
Yeah.
that as well. Yeah.
So if that pops...
yeah, big trouble.
And once again, it's US tech firms that are investing here in Australia. That's where the money's coming from.
Do you think there's any capacity or any, shall I say, political will to actually get homegrown grassroots Australian tech firms that can do this work?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, James, is that we do have Australian startups. However, I think once they get to a certain size, a lot of the time they sell them. They get sold off. They get bought up by massive US private equity firms and corporations. I imagine if you are an Australian startup and you get offered $10 billion by a US tech firm, you're most likely going to take it.
Yep.
I also think it's difficult for Australian startups to compete against massive US conglomerates.
Of course. I guess that's where you kind of need to have a bit more government intervention.
Yeah.
And essentially kind of like not an industrial plan, but a plan to develop and facilitate these operations.
Yeah, and look, man, I would hope that that's what Scott Farquhar is envisioning.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical if that's what he's envisioning.
Yeah, that is true. Again, you don't get to be, that wealthy a man
No.
from relying on that, essentially.
No, definitely not. However, James, the point of my analysis is not merely just to highlight that these data centers are resource thirsty. and rather dystopian. These data centers represent a new form of capital goods. That is, produced means of production, similar to any form of machinery, tools, equipment, or plants. So I'm going to borrow from the economist Yanis Varoufakis and his theory of techno-feudalism, which you are familiar with. So these centers, along with the clouds and algorithms which they support, are what Varoufakis refers to as cloud capital, and are owned by what he calls cloud capitalists. This is an interesting theory that I think is worth having a look at.
Absolutely.
So every time you or a business uses a service provided by big tech giants, whether that is Google and its AI search engine, an AI service such as ChatGPT, or even just doom scrolling on social media, you're training these systems to better understand your desires and habits, and then to sell you goods and services. In effect, you are providing free labor and data to train this cloud capital system, which then you pay rent in the form of subscription and fees in order to use their platforms and buy their goods and services.
Of course. Well, that's very, very accurate.
Yeah.
I think, and it's a very good method of analysis to understand. But again, they just put up like toll booths, essentially, on your way to get a good or a service that they manipulate you into wanting to buy, and they just put up a toll booth, essentially. And then that's how they profit, essentially. So you exist within this tightly controlled, electronic fiefdom. I guess that's kind of the thrust of his...
That's the thrust of his argument. I just think people need to look at these data centers and what he refers to as cloud capital as the modern forms of kind of what the textile mills were, the industrial factories of old, the machine tools that we used to have, except now they are data centers. Very resource-thirsty data centers. And look, while we continue to build these, it's going to be the government that provides tax breaks and incentives, and we are subsidizing these companies to build these tech empires. In fact, reports from the US now show that people are paying a surcharge on their electricity bills, as I mentioned before, to provide the infrastructure. And as the costs are socialized, the profits are privatized.
The tale as old as capitalism itself, Jordy.
That's exactly right. And look, James, it wouldn't be a great left hook segment if we didn't play a very dystopian video to close up the segment.
Perfect.
It's not something that you just hear, it's something that you just feel, and enough to the point when it's really, really strong, you can even hear the windows vibrate.
He spent $20,000 on insulation and replacing all the upstairs windows. Still, the sound and the feeling of the constant hum keep him from sleeping.
I'm getting bombarded each and every night. And again, I can feel it. Even if I touch the wall, you could feel the vibrations on the wall.
The American Public Health Association says chronic noise exposure can lead to serious health problems like cardiovascular disease or increased stress. Carlos's son started having nightmares.
Recently, with my kid, he's 7 years old. He was waking up a few times. I was trying to figure out what was going on. And one day he told me, Dad, there's a spaceship outside. And as a father, it's terrible because I can't do anything about it.
Since replacing the windows, they've also tried white noise machines. At one point, Carlos moved his whole family down to the basement to try to escape the vibrations. After the local homeowners association raised concerns to county officials and Amazon executives, they initially tried to muffle the sound by putting material around the fans on top of the buildings. When that didn't work, they replaced the fans themselves with taller exhaust vents. The noise level did drop, but Carlos and his neighbors say they can still feel the vibrations from the data centers. An Amazon spokesperson told us the centers operate well below required sound levels. Meanwhile, Carlos feels stuck. He's worried that the data centers will reduce the value of his home, and he'll never recoup the money he spent on it, even if he decides to move.
That's quite a dystopian insight into data centers,
That's
is it not?
so rough, dude. Poor guy.
Yeah.
That's actually horrific. Yeah, and like obviously Amazon and Google don't care.
No.
You know, because Carlos is probably laying in bed at night, unable to sleep due to this that's vibrating his house. So he probably gets his phone out and he goes onto Google and he goes, how do I reduce noise? And then Amazon pops up with a ding, here's your new, acoustic insulation you can line your house with.
Yeah.
That result was powered by the data center that is torturing
And
him.
his electricity bill.
Yeah, dude. Oh.
Also, he lived like 150 meters away from one of these data centers. It
was not
wasn't
close.
like it was on the back of his property.
Yeah. Wow. That's insane. But I guess like all kind of centers of like profit, when it comes to being amongst the population, they will have the say of what they could do, essentially. Yeah. So just as factories, are happy to destroy, and big businesses can destroy ecosystems and pollute rivers and cover it up, which is paid for both, in terms of the health effects and in terms of the actual, material cleanup costs by the public, I think we're going to see the same thing here.
Yeah, James. And as I said, I just think it's good to look at the political economy of these things, who owns them, how they're used in production, where the profits are going, what resources are needed to sustain them, and also the jobs they create. Because apart from a security guard and some software engineers, they are capital and resource intensive, and they're not heaps labour intensive. No. They don't generate heaps of jobs. So while a lot of people, especially politicians here in Australia, applaud these data centres, they see it as, Australia becoming the home of future AI infrastructure.
Yep.
I think people, Australian policymakers and the public need to think about what that means for the future and how they're actually going to be used in the economy.
And hopefully our government is kind of strong enough and robust enough, regardless of who's in power, to kind of foresee this and act in the way that will benefit the Australian people or reduce damage to the Australian population and the Australian continent.
Unfortunately, not very optimistic.
No, neither am I.
Let's wrap that up. I hope people found that interesting.
Yep.
And watch out for data centers.
No worries. In a couple of years' time, we will also be AI. So we'll see you next time. Like, comment, subscribe.
Cheers. See you later.